Hello, friends, and welcome back to Malicious Compliance Stories. Let's start our video with a story in which we tell about the obnoxious situation in the restaurant and how some people reverse on things so quickly when there's somebody bigger than them on the scene. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. Here we go. I'd be happy to get the chef for you. I'm a manager at a restaurant. We offer a variety of different menu items, much like an Applebee's, but we're better. One of my servers comes to me with an issue about a customer stating, "This guy at my table's pissed off because he thinks we served him raw salmon." I walk over with my server following behind, and before I can greet anyone at the table, Mr. Guy shouts, "This guy served me raw salmon! Are you people trying to kill me?" He's pointing at the server, who has nothing to do with how the meal's prepared. I politely ask the man to lower his voice and we can figure this out, whatever it takes. He isn't having it, and is getting louder and is beginning to cause a scene, grabbing the attention of the other guests. I grab the salmon off the table to get it out of his face as my server brings the menu over. "Sir, why don't you take a look at the menu while I take this to the back, pick out whatever you'd like, and it's on me tonight," I explained, wishing I could smack him with this dead fish. I head to the kitchen with salmon in hand and we begin to dissect it to see if it's really raw or not. It was not even close. In fact, it was a little overcooked. After myself and the other managers in the kitchen discuss the a-hole at table 45, my server lets me know that Mr. Guy is headed this way and he doesn't look happy. Before I continue, Mr. Guy is about 6'1", built like a shaved bird, bald head with a wife beater on. He's standing outside the kitchen demanding every one of my employees that he speaks with me, and he's using profanities, which does not fly with me. I hastily grasp the situation and tell him that he needs to quit cursing or I'm throwing him out. This didn't sit well with Mr. Guy. He gets in my face and shouts, "I'm not leaving until I have a chat with the guy who cooked my salmon." "Sir, I'd be happy to get the chef for you. Give me 1 minute." I hurry back to the kitchen and grab Tony, explain the situation, and we both walk back out to the front of the house together. Tony's a 6'4", very large black man with a do-rag on and a toothpick hanging out of his mouth, sporting a Samuel Jackson bad mother effer look on his face. Mr. Guy's demeanor does a 180 in an instant. He looks at me and quietly says, "I'm sorry for cursing. We'll take the check." I printed out his check and he scurried back to his family, paid for his meal, tipped my server $15 and left. I never saw him again. And our next story. Karen accused me of stealing my own car, called the cops on me. I live in one of those middle-of-nowhere desert towns where almost everyone knows almost everyone, and it's hot as hell but dirt cheap to buy a home or land in. I end up buying a small plot of land with a trailer on it off a local guy that decided he was going to move to Texas, and the guy also sold me his old Ford Escort prior to that. 10 years have gone by since then, and for a while I spent a lot of my time tinkering with an old 87 Monte Carlo that I bought super cheap as it was without an engine or transmission. I spent 2 years fixing up the one I got with help from some friends and finished it in 2019. Since the engine was missing, I dropped in a junkyard Chevy 305 V8 that was also connected to a rebuilt 4-speed automatic transmission with low miles from a totaled car. Now, I didn't really trust some of the local law enforcement out here before, like a guy that went out of his way to move to my town just to be a cop. In this case, he was the nephew of the sheriff. He even bought his own Crown Vic with a loudspeaker to drive around town in. Now let's call this guy NC for nephew cop since he was the sheriff's nephew. NC and I didn't know each other personally yet, but I was aware of him. He was dumb as a rock and high on his own ego. He was like Barney Fife and John Cena had an illegitimate son together because he was a tall, strong-looking man that was always giving people creepy looks and patrolled on foot up and down Main Street with a clipboard in hand and a big grin on his face. He also liked to publicly flex his muscles in front of people. One Saturday morning, I took my Monte Carlo out to meet a friend, but they ended up bailing because of a last-minute issue with their girlfriend. I thought, no problem, I'll just get some fast food and go home. I went to the local burger place and got a meal to go, and as I was walking out, there was a lady outside looking over my car. I usually don't mind talking so long as they're polite, though this woman ended up anything but. She was curvy and good-looking while wearing a black miniskirt, I'm guessing early to mid-30s or so. Not really sure. I asked her if she liked my car. She stood up, took one look at me, and snickered. I asked her what was so funny. To get an idea of what I looked like at the time, I was a skinny guy with a scraggly beard and was wearing a faded AC/DC t-shirt with the sleeves ripped off, along with worn-out cut-off denim shorts and flip-flops. I guess she figured I was poor or something, so she was probably judging my appearance. She looked me up and down in a very obvious way and then said, "There's no way this is your car. You couldn't possibly afford something this nice." Now, I have a tendency to get sarcastic or snide when people make assumptions about me. So I sit back, "Oh, really, lady? The title is in my name, and these keys right here in my hand say I'm the owner too." The Karen just glared at me as I put the keys in the lock and began to open the door. I looked behind her and noticed a beige 90s Volvo with a missing headlight and had out-of-state plates on it parked not far from me. I put two and two together and laughed. "Let me guess, lady, that's your car over there?" She started to turn beet red. I laughed and said, "Oh, don't be ashamed. Those things aren't lookers, but they'll run forever." I figured this was over, but as I was opening my car door, I suddenly felt her nails digging into my shoulder. She was screeching so loud my ears were hurting, and before I could turn around, she kicked me between my legs from behind with a high-heeled shoe so hard I collapsed in agony. And true to my luck, NC drove up because he'd heard her screeching from down the street during his noon patrol. As soon as NC was out of his car, Karen ran to him crying and saying that I was a carjacker that was attempting to take her new car. I wasn't looking at either of them as I was on the ground wincing in a fetal position from the pain. The next thing I heard was NC yelling, "Put your hands behind your back!" And then I was being pinned down by his knee on my spine and forcibly cuffed. I tried telling NC that I knew his uncle and can prove I'm the real owner of the car, but he told me to shut up. Then he picked my keys up off the ground and actually handed them to Karen. Then he seemed to do a hero pose while she gave me a crap-eating grin. No matter what I said, NC wasn't listening to me because he fully believed her. Then NC drugged me back to the sheriff's office. I hoped his uncle was in, but just my bad luck, he was out to lunch. So NC put me in the cell and told me to keep quiet. I was pissed, but I knew I wasn't going to make my situation any better, so I just waited. And during that time, NC kept giving me looks of contempt. At one point, he walked across the cell with a nightstick, grazing it against each bar like he was trying to intimidate me. At least an hour went by and the sheriff finally came in through the door, nursing a big gulp, but froze the second he saw me. "OP, what are you doing here?" he asked. I was about to speak when NC jumped in and said, "I caught this lowlife creep trying to steal a lady's car, so I hauled him in." That's when I finally got my chance to speak and said, "Yeah, only it was my car. The one I spent so long fixing up?" NC just rolled his eyes and said not to listen to me, but the sheriff silenced him and asked my full story. As I tried to tell it, NC was making dismissive looks and kept repeatedly interrupting until the sheriff told him to sit down and shut up. Then when I was finally able to say everything that happened, he was furious. The sheriff laid into NC, who was cowering in a chair like a little boy, and saying that it indeed was my car, and he stupidly gave my keys to a thief that had assaulted me. NC started frantically apologizing and trying to say he was just trying to help, but the sheriff called him an idiot that just wanted to play hero by saving a damsel in distress. And now the whole department would be in hot water for his unlawful arrest and physical assault against me. Then he finally let me out of the cell. I got some ice for my crotch and got taken home. The sheriff and NC went back to the burger restaurant, but Karen's car was no longer there. They got the CCTV footage from the camera the restaurant had looking outside. It caught everything minus the audio. Karen came back riding piggyback with a guy on a motorcycle over half an hour from the time she left with my car. She blew him a kiss, then drove off in her Volvo. The sheriff scrambled everyone, even NC, to try and chase her down, but they couldn't find her as she'd already driven out of the county lines. Some phone calls were made to other departments to look for her, and I had to sit at home with an ice pack on my crotch all evening, waiting for news on what happened. A couple days later, my car was found just a few miles out of town. The Karen had broken all the windows with what I'm assuming was the tire iron, and then put the car in neutral and let it coast down a deep, rocky hill, which rolled it into the bottom of the ditch, which smashed the front end and warped the frame. It was completely totaled. I wanted to cry from the sound of metal grinding on rock as the tow truck pulled it back up. NC was there too, and he couldn't even look at me the entire time. My insurance also didn't want to cover the car, so the sheriff's office was made to pay me the value of my Monte Carlo. since the NC let it happen, which was only about $5,000. Though that was honestly close to what I had into it, since I did almost all the work by hand with the help of friends. NC also paid me another $2,000 for my trouble and said it was most of his savings. The Karen was caught at a motel a state over sometime later and arrested for possession and distribution. Grand theft auto was just one of many things she was charged with. I got on a video call just to see her in court and testify. She looked like a wreck the whole time because she knew she was screwed, and it wasn't long before she was pronounced guilty. She got 10 years behind bars with no possibility of parole. NC was demoted to sitting at a desk all day answering phones, and they would be docking part of his pay until every penny was paid back. He's still regulated to desk duty half the time these days, and he still avoids me anytime I'm near him. Arguably, he's a better cop now, though, because he's mellowed out. I made sure to have better insurance this time around, and I'll be damned if I ever let a Karen near my car again. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.